So we're in 2026 now, and like every new year, we can't help but think about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to become. For many of us, it starts off the same: strong intentions for positive change, New Year resolutions that we hope will actually stick. Yet by February, up to 80% of us will have completely abandoned our New Year's resolutions. It's become so commonplace that many of us find it pointless to wait for a new year to make a change, which is totally valid since time is the constant that waits for no one. But the reality is, time frames matter because we remember our lives through chapters: graduations, first jobs, breakups, anniversaries, wins, losses, each one defining a season in our life that is relative to time. And for every season in life, there is a lesson to be learned. So in this video, I'm sharing 26 mindset shifts that have the power to change your life. These are lessons that have personally changed how I think, how I feel, and how I live my life. And just to be clear, this isn't some exhaustive list of hard and fast rules that I'm telling you to follow. You should critically think for yourself and do what works for you. But what I will say is, if you want these concepts to stick, they must be internalized on an identity level, because repeated thoughts become beliefs, and beliefs about yourself become identity, and identity is what drives consistent behavior. Oh, and if you can master number 17 on this list, you'll be golden. So let's get started. Mindset shift number 1. Define your version of success. Here's an inconvenient truth. A lot of people live lives of quiet desperation because they're chasing versions of success that were never actually their own to begin with. Society has a way of subtly programming us to believe that climbing the corporate ladder, holding a fancy title, or accumulating material wealth will automatically make us happy. But it's a trap to confuse external validation with internal fulfillment. You don't want to look back and realize you spent your entire life playing a game you never consciously chose. This is what I think of as goal hijacking, pursuing goals that don't actually align with who you are or what you value deep down. If you want to avoid this kind of regret, then ask yourself this simple question: what does success actually look like to me? Maybe it's having a creative freedom, control over your time, or surrounding yourself with like-minded people. When you define success on your own terms, you're creating a roadmap that aligns with what really matters to you. And that's how you build a life that feels genuinely fulfilling, not just impressive on the outside. Mindset shift number 2. Prioritize peace over happiness. I used to place happiness on a pedestal, and it's easy to understand why. Everyone talks about wanting to be happy, like it's the ultimate goal in life. But I've changed my mind on this because happiness is an emotion that comes and goes like the weather. It's easily influenced by external circumstances, situations, and even how you've slept. When I started choosing peace over happiness, I realized how easy it actually was to convert peace into happiness. So stop arguing with reality, feeding every anxious thought, and outsourcing your emotional state to things you can't control. When you're in a state of peace, you feel steady, calm, and grounded. And from that place, happiness becomes a byproduct that you can easily access, not just something you chase. So instead of chasing happiness, protect your peace and happiness will show up naturally. Mindset shift number 3. Curate your environment. You're probably wildly underestimating this one thing: your environment. And I don't just mean your physical space, but also the people you surround yourself with. Whether you realize it or not, your environment is constantly shaping you. The language you speak, the beliefs you hold, and the habits you practice have all been heavily influenced by it. If you're in a library, you'll naturally speak softer. If all your friends are out of shape, chances are you are too. You can think of your environment like gravity, pulling you to absorb attitudes, norms, standards, and behaviors around you. Your environment creates pressure, and that pressure is always pulling you towards equilibrium. Now, I'm not saying you can't resist your environment with sheer willpower. You can try, but what I am saying is that a conducive environment will make it so you don't have to, because proximity shapes probability. So if you want to change your life, then intentionally place yourself in environments that make the right behaviors easier. When you curate your environment, you get closer to the results you want. Mindset shift number 4, reframe failures as feedback. If you're afraid to fail, let me save you years of regret and procrastination. One of the biggest lies you tell yourself is that failure is proof you're not succeeding. The reality is failure is the main ingredient to success. If you're busy allowing the fear of failure to dictate your life, you'll later realize that the biggest failure wasn't failing, it was failing to even try. Not trying is the only thing that actually guarantees failure. The concept of success literally cannot exist without failure. And if you really think about it, any interesting story worth telling was never just an upward trajectory. Setbacks, roadblocks, and failures are what make that success story that much more meaningful because it adds depth. So instead of viewing failure as a verdict on your identity, reframe failure as feedback and let it guide you towards your eventual success. Mindset shift number 5, create systems and routines. I don't know who needs to hear this, but motivation and discipline are not enough when it comes to getting things done. Motivation is fleeting and discipline is like a muscle that still gets fatigued. This is something that I still struggle with, but what I can tell you is if you're trying to become more consistent, then create systems and routines on top of your discipline and motivation. This will add a compounding effect to your effort. Just think of systems like guardrails that remove decision fatigue and allow you to make progress through repeatable behaviors. If you want to work out in the morning, put your gym clothes where you can see them. If you want to write consistently, then keep your journal on your table. When you build systems, your behaviors become more predictable and less dependent on willpower alone. Mindset shift number 6, trust your gut. Many of the worst decisions I've made have had one thing in common. I ignored my gut instinct. We often talk about intuition like it's some mystical phenomenon that can't be explained by neuroscience, but let me break it down for you. Your gut has the second highest number of neurons in your body after your brain. So when people say trust your gut, it's not just a figure of speech. That gut feeling is your brain and body processing information outside of conscious awareness. You're basically picking up on patterns, tones, inconsistencies, past experiences, and subtle cues faster than your rational mind can articulate them. That's why when you look back at past decisions, it's amazing how often your gut was actually right. Intuition is a form of intelligence where thoughts are the language of your brain and feelings are the language of your body. So this is just your friendly reminder to trust your gut. Mindset shift number 7, stop seeking approval. Here's the part no one tells you about being too nice. You're quietly teaching people how to treat you. As someone who's been a people pleaser for years, take it from me. When your need for validation is higher than your willingness to assert your boundaries, you will allow people to take advantage of you. Without realizing it, you begin to outsource your self-worth and agency. Life becomes a performance where you try to say the right things to be liked, which slowly makes you malleable. Over time, you tolerate subtle disrespect because you would rather stay in agreement than risk confrontation. And this can breed frustration and resentment inside of you, which can lead to rumination about what you should have done. Or even worse, it can foster a victim mindset because you constantly feel wronged. But what you have to realize is that you did this to yourself. So if you want to take back your power, you have to stop seeking approval. Start valuing your boundaries and say no when you mean no. I get that we're social animals living in relation to others, but Caring more about how you see yourself than how others perceive you is what builds self-respect and strengthens your self-image. Mindset shift number 8. Focus on trajectory over position. So many of us fall into the trap of waiting to be happy. I did this for years, telling myself I'd feel good once I hit that goal. The problem is some goals take years, decades, or never even happen. So the question is, are you really going to postpone contentment the entire time? Don't get me wrong, like being ambitious and wanting more for yourself isn't the issue. The issue is holding the mindset of only giving yourself permission to feel good at some future milestone. If most of your life is spent anticipating happiness instead of experiencing it, you're doing your life a disservice. What changed things for me was focusing on trajectory over position. Instead of obsessing over where I am currently, I focus on where I am heading. Am I learning, growing, and building momentum? When you start to value getting 1% better every day over just being number one, you start tracking growth and not just the outcomes. This allows you to fall in love with the direction and journey, not just the destination. Mindset shift number 9. Practice metacognition. Most people think automatically, but very few actually stop to observe how they think. I talk a lot about building self-awareness, and one of the most underrated ways to develop it is through metacognition. Metacognition is simply thinking about your thinking. When you can notice a thought instead of immediately identifying with it, you create space. Space to question your thoughts, redirect them, and even choose a better response. This is extremely powerful because it's a form of intelligence that is also a skill you can develop to make you more aware. Here's a simple way to practice it. The next time you catch yourself thinking something negative about yourself or someone else, I want you to pause and ask yourself, is this a fact or an interpretation? What triggered this thought? And what is the deeper meaning behind it? When you can do this consistently, you start uncovering hidden patterns about yourself and how you see the world. Over time, you stop being controlled by your mind and start working with it. Mindset shift number 10. Start before you're ready. If you're stuck overthinking your next step, here's what I can tell you from personal experience. Waiting for the perfect condition to start is just procrastination masquerading as cautious thinking. Just remember that imperfect action beats perfect inaction every day of the week. I know it's scary, but sometimes you have to build the bridge as you go. And that's what creates insights along the way, allowing you to pivot, iterate, and course correct. If you never start, time will still pass and you'll find yourself in the same position next year. But when you start before you're ready, the best case scenario is that you make progress or succeed, and the worst case scenario is that you learn. The irony is we believe we have to wait for confidence to begin, when the reality is confidence is built through the process of doing. Only through experience can you stack evidence of your abilities. Start before you're ready, and the confidence will be a byproduct of the progress you make over time. By the way, if you're ready to stop overthinking and reclaim your mental clarity, I've put together a free ebook called Don't Overthink It. I know the title is pretty straightforward, but it's a simple guide that helps you understand the root cause of overthinking and gives you actionable strategies to build confidence in your decision making. So grab a copy in the link in the description below. Mindset shift number 11. Protect your sleep. Common knowledge isn't always commonly practiced. Everyone knows sleep matters, but many of us still treat it like it's optional. If there's one thing that has genuinely helped me boost my mental and physical health overall, it's improving my sleep. And honestly, I still struggle with sleep consistency around what time I go to bed, but making sure I get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night has been a serious game changer. My energy is higher, my thinking is clearer, and my mood is more stable. Plus, it plays a huge role in your metabolism for fat loss, if anyone likes that. Just think of sleep as a force multiplier that quietly improves every area of your life. The evidence is very clear. Poor sleep amplifies anxiety, overthinking, emotional reactivity, brain fog, and irritability. So stop treating sleep like it's optional. Protect and prioritize it like it's your job because it directly impacts how you show up on a daily basis. Mindset shift number 12. Subtract to grow. We're often conditioned to think more is better. So we stay busy with more work, more commitments, more goals, and more productivity hacks. The dirty trick we play on ourselves is believing that being busy means we're moving forward. What I've come to learn is that with a finite number of hours in a day, growth requires subtraction to create room. For me, I stepped back from relationships that created emotional turmoil, cut subscriptions that kept me distracted, and said no to social plans that felt like obligations. I also let go of unnecessary tasks that drained my time. This one shift has simplified my life tremendously and also reduced my stress and anxiety. If you want to grow, then start by subtracting the things in your life that are no longer serving you. When you remove the noise, the signal gets clearer. You step off the self-inflicted hamster wheel and finally create space to focus, build momentum, and move toward what actually matters to you. Mindset shift number 13. Reprogram your identity. Here's an inconvenient truth. Most people try to change their life without changing themselves. You can force habits, but they rarely stick when they aren't tied to your identity. Real behavior change works like this. Repeated thoughts become beliefs, beliefs about yourself shape your identity, and your identity drives your behavior, often without you even realizing it. So the reality is that you will act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you wish to be. That's why new habits can feel hard to maintain. If you try to run but don't see yourself as a runner, it feels forced. But once you identify as a runner, running just becomes what you do. The same applies to your diet. When you stop seeing yourself as someone trying to eat healthy and start seeing yourself as someone who just eats healthy, your narrative changes. When you reprogram your identity, your internal story changes and your actions naturally follow. Mindset shift number 14. Take radical responsibility. I wish I learned this earlier in life. For a long time, I carried a victim mindset that was driven by a quiet sense of entitlement. Don't get me wrong, life can be unfair and unfortunate things do happen. So venting feels relieving and complaining feels validating. But as you get older, you have to realize that the life you're living is largely shaped by the small decisions you've made repeatedly over time. And this might sting to hear, but it's also extremely liberating. Taking radical responsibility means you stop blaming people, circumstances, or the world for where you are in life. To put it bluntly, you don't get to own your wins and outsource your losses. You either take ownership for both or neither. So stop waiting to be rescued and put yourself back into the driver's seat. No one is coming to save you, so you might as well save yourself by taking ownership. And when you hold yourself accountable, you build self-trust, emotional maturity, and a sense of pride for the progress that you do make. Mindset shift number 15. Don't believe every thought. If you're struggling with anxiety, here's something you might not realize. Your brain is designed to keep you safe by anticipating threats. The problem is that most modern threats aren't physical. They're social fears like rejection, judgment, failure, or uncertainty. But because your body can't tell the difference, it processes these perceived threats as real danger, keeping your amygdala hyperactive. When your nervous system stays stuck in a state of fight or flight, your body feels anxious even when you're actually safe. This is why you can't believe every thought you have. Doing so keeps your system overstimulated and overwhelmed. When you learn to observe your thoughts instead of identifying with them, you allow them to pass through you instead of attaching meaning to all of them. This awareness helps you calm your nervous system, tells your body it's safe, and regulates your emotions. And with practice, this gives you a deeper sense of peace. Mindset shift number 16. Bet on yourself. You know what the biggest difference is between someone who lives a life of regret and one who doesn't? It all boils down to one simple decision. At some point, one person decides to bet on themselves instead of allowing the fear of failure to stop them from doubling down on what makes them unique. The truth is, no one will ever beat you at being you. There will never be another person with your demeanor, fingerprint, tone of voice, lived experiences, and mindset. You are literally one of one, and your uniqueness is your superpower. So when you choose to invest in your skills, take ownership of your growth, and aim to get better each day, what you are really doing is showing yourself that you believe in yourself, and that aligned action builds self-trust and reshapes your self-image. The sad reality is most people never make that bet. They follow the norm because it feels safe and then wonder why they get the same results as everyone else. Don't let comfortable complacency decide your future. Bet on yourself and let your uniqueness compound over time. Mindset shift number 17. Become your own best friend. I wish I understood this earlier. The way you speak to yourself is the relationship you have with yourself. And that relationship is the foundation of your self-esteem and internal peace. Growing up, I didn't realize how negative my self-talk was. I would beat myself up for mistakes I made and things I said incorrectly. But when I started catching that voice in real time and intentionally choosing to be kind and encouraging instead, everything changed. My default self-talk shifted from negative to positive, and my relationship with myself improved drastically. I literally became my own best friend. And when that happened, my standards also changed. I stopped tolerating relationships that were draining or disrespectful, because now I would rather be alone and at peace than surrounded by negative energy. And this is what created room for new and more positive relationships to come into my life. So if there is one thing you can do this year, become your own best friend, because the relationship you have with yourself will dictate every other relationship you have as well. Mindset shift number 18. Pick your pain. We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid pain, which makes total sense because pain is uncomfortable. But the truth is, pain is an unavoidable part of life. Exercising is painful, but so is being unhealthy. Growth is painful, but so is stagnation. Discipline is painful, but so is the pain of regret. So the real question isn't, how do I avoid pain, but rather, which pain do I want to choose? Discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a signal that something is changing. The actionable part is deciding between the pain that keeps you stuck and the pain that moves you forward. When you pick the pain that leads to long-term growth, discomfort stops feeling like danger because it starts becoming the direction you need to lean into. Mindset shift number 19. Choose quantity over quality. Here's a mindset shift that sounds wrong at first, but totally makes sense. When you're trying to develop a skill, choose quantity over quality. I'll be the first to admit that I value quality over quantity, but I've come to realize that quality is created through quantity. Skills aren't built by waiting for the perfect attempt. They're built by showing up, putting in the reps, and being willing to be bad at the beginning. Imperfect action is what gives you feedback, allowing you to sharpen your next attempt. This is why if you chase perfection too early, you might hesitate, overthink, and stall. But when you embrace volume and imperfection, this enables you to gain momentum. So stop trying to get it right and start trying to get better, because skill mastery is the byproduct of repetition. By the way, if you're looking to stop overthinking, improve your decision making, or make a mindset shift, I come out with a weekly mindset newsletter. It's absolutely free, and I share personal stories that I don't post anywhere else, and it's a great way to connect. So I'll drop a link in the description below. Mindset shift number 20. Do what works for you. Earlier in my career, I would eat big lunches filled with carbs and then wonder why I would be hit with 1 to 2 hours of brutal food coma. For the longest time, I just thought this was normal. I didn't even realize that the type of food I was eating, particularly white rice, was causing me to have serious brain fog and a lack of focus. The interesting thing was finding out that this didn't impact everyone else the same. There's a ton of advice out there telling you what you should and should not do, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And while a lot of advice is broadly applicable, the reality is it's not always a one size fits all. Maybe you're a night owl, not an early riser. Maybe you think clearer when you skip breakfast. Maybe you recharge through alone time instead of constant social interaction. Whatever your thing is, when you pay attention to your own patterns, run experiments, and notice what works well with your biology and your personality, you end up building a life that actually fits you. So do what works for you. Mindset shift number 21. Step into the silence. Is it just me, or have you also noticed that your best ideas come when you're either doing the dishes, taking a shower, or going for a walk without distractions? Now, this isn't a coincidence, but something that's super obvious. Whenever you step into the silence, what you are doing is creating room to hear your own thoughts. And this is where you're able to capture spontaneous ideas that emerge simply because you're not distracted by the attention economy. Screens, apps, and notifications are designed to keep you connected to the external world, but at the expense of keeping you disconnected from your inner voice and mental clarity. When I started stepping into the silence, it definitely felt uncomfortable at first, but the brain quickly adapts and normalizes the feeling. And the more you do it, you begin to realize just how much of a superpower it is, because it restores your ability to think clearly and be at ease with your own mind. Mindset shift number 22. Stop multitasking. Now, I think it goes without saying, but you can't actually think two thoughts simultaneously. And this is why multitasking feels productive, but it isn't. When you start a task, it takes roughly 15 to 30 minutes to get into deep focus. This happens for a few reasons. First, your brain has to quiet leftover thoughts from whatever you were doing before. Second, it has to rebuild context on your current task. And third, your brain has to stabilize attention long enough for thinking to deepen. So if you're multitasking, all you're really doing is constantly context switching and fracturing your attention. You're basically starting from zero each time and creating slippage because it forces your brain to have to reorientate itself each time it changes tasks. So if you want to increase your productivity and focus, then decide on one task and ignore the rest. Time box. Batch similar tasks instead of mixing them, and finish one task before starting another. When you treat focus as a limited resource and prioritize one task at a time, you feel less scatterbrained, less overwhelmed, and you ultimately get more things done. Mindset shift number 23. Accept life's nuance. Have you ever noticed how we tend to oversimplify life? Like good or bad, right or wrong, win or lose. Binary thinking feels clean and explainable, and I've gone back and forth on this idea because I used to view things this way. If someone hurt me, they were bad. If something failed, then that meant I failed. And it took me ages to realize that a lot of my resentment and frustration came from trying to neatly fit people and situations into boxes. The mindset shift I made was choosing to accept life's nuance. People are complex, situations are layered, and most things exist on a spectrum, not at the edges. And let me be clear, this isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about recognizing that the human condition is messy. When you stop fighting this reality and start accepting it as it is, you allow your nervous system to calm down. Tension is reduced, by gaining perspective. The truth is, life isn't always black and white, and that's okay. Sometimes internal peace comes from allowing complexity to just exist. Mindset shift number 24. Avoid energy vampires. Here's something to consider. Your time and energy are like currencies that you exchange with other people. How you choose to spend it doesn't just impact the quality of your life, it also shapes it. So if you want more peace, you have to avoid energy vampires. And if you're wondering who the energy vampires are, it's simple. Pay attention to how a person consistently makes you feel. When you interact with them, do you feel lighter or heavier, more grounded or more exhausted? These feelings are information. And I'm not trying to villainize anyone. All I'm saying is that your environment can wear you down, even if no harm is intended. Consistently negative or closed-minded people may not be malicious, but their energy still affects you. And it's up to you to set boundaries on your time and energy. So if you want a better life, be intentional about who you allow into your space, because what you tolerate will inadvertently shape you in slow and predictable ways. Mindset shift number 25. Slow down to speed up. Have you ever tried typing really fast because you felt rushed, then ended up having to hit backspace over and over because of all the mistakes? It's kind of funny because in that moment, you realize that it would have been faster if you had just took your time. And this example points to a bigger pattern in life. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. We often think moving fast is the only way to get ahead, but sometimes the opposite is true, especially at the start. When you practice slowing down and becoming more precise, you build a stronger foundation that reduces friction later. And this is because doing things properly at the start helps you to prevent needing to clean up mistakes down the line. So if you want to build sustainable long-term growth, sometimes you need to slow down to speed up, and the momentum will naturally follow. Mindset shift number 26. Be honest with yourself. No one ever tells you how hard it actually is to be honest with yourself. For decades, I've been afraid to admit my flaws and insecurities. I'd get defensive because I have a big ego and wanted to be seen as someone who had everything together. But here's what I've learned. When you aren't honest with yourself, you live in denial, and denial avoids accountability, both with yourself and others, whether you realize it or not. It creates an internal tension that feels heavy to carry. When I acknowledged my ego and insecurities, I stopped taking myself so seriously. And this clarity gave me something to work with. So whenever my ego comes up, I can regulate and channel it into drive instead of defensiveness. And don't get me wrong, I don't get this right every time. It's definitely a work in progress. But this isn't about flaunting flaws. It's about grounding yourself in reality. Living in denial creates cognitive dissonance because you're holding on to conflicting beliefs about who you are. For me, it was wanting to appear put together while not feeling that way inside. Carl Jung called this shadow work. So practice being radically honest with yourself. When you can explore and integrate the hidden and negative parts about yourself, this is what allows real growth to happen. So if there's anything I hope you can take away from these mindset shifts, it's this. If you think about the word mindset, it literally means the way you've set your mind. Your mindset is what shapes how you see the world and how you see yourself. And this is where most of us get it wrong. We try to change what's happening on the outside without realizing that it starts from the inside. When you improve your mindset, it changes how you think, how you feel, and how you act. It becomes the literal bridge that connects who you are with who you could become. So thanks so much for watching. My name is Dexter, and have a wonderful and transformative year ahead. Bye-bye.